The girl in the snow fell like white dust over the alien city, covering the streets in a thin, icy sheet. Daniel pulled his scarf tighter around his neck as he walked, his boots crunching with each step. The air was freezing, sharp enough to sting his skin, and most people hurried indoors to escape it. That was when he saw her. She was standing near the steps of a closed shop, her thin arms wrapped around herself. Her skin was pale blue, but in the cold it had turned almost gray. She had no clothes, nothing but her own trembling body to shield her from the wind. Her hair, silver and tangled, clung to her face and her eyes. They were wide, dark, and full of a kind of quiet fear that made Daniel's stomach twist. People passed her by. Some didn't look at her at all. Others stared for a moment and then smirked, whispering things to each other in their own alien language. A pair of young alien men laughed openly, pointing at her bare feet pressed into the snow. Daniel slowed, his pace, his breath fogging in the air. He was a human here, an outsider on this world. The rules were strict, and he'd learned long ago that helping the wrong person could mean trouble. But the sight of her shaking so badly, her lips turning, a faint purple froze him in place. He could have walked on. He should have. That's what his instincts told him. But something in her eyes, something desperate held him. One of the laughing alien men stepped closer to her, sneering. He said something sharp, and though Daniel didn't understand the exact words, the meaning was clear. The man shoved her shoulder. She stumbled, almost falling into the snow. She didn't fight back. She didn't even raise her hands to defend herself. She just stood there, shaking, looking at the ground. Daniel's jaw tightened. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "Hey!" His voice cut through the cold air. The alien men turned to look at him. One frowned, the other smirked. Human. The smirking one said in a tone that dripped with mockery. Daniel ignored them. He shrugged off his thick, fur-lined coat and stepped up to the girl. She didn't look at him right away. She seemed confused, as if no one had ever come close without harm in mind. Slowly, he placed the coat around her shoulders. She flinched at first, as though expecting a blow. But then the warmth reached her, and she froze, her eyes snapping up to meet his. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Behind them, the aliens started shouting in their language. The tone was angry, almost accusing. Daniel felt eyes on him from all around. Passersby had stopped to watch. He knew he had just crossed an invisible line. The girl clutched the coat tighter around herself, her thin fingers gripping the fabric like it was the only thing keeping her alive. She looked terrified, not of him, but of what might come next. "Can you walk?" Danielle asked quietly. She nodded once. "Then let's get you out of here." As he turned to guide her away, one of the alien men stepped in front of him, blocking the path. "You can't take her," the man said in broken human language. "She is not for you." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "She's freezing to death." The alien man's lip curled. "She is outcast. No help for outcast." Daniel didn't respond. He simply took the girl's arm gently and moved to the side. Stepping around the man, he expected the alien to grab him, maybe even strike him. But instead, the man only muttered something under his breath and spat into the snow. The crowd didn't follow. But their stares burned into Daniel's back as he led the girl down the street. He could feel her trembling through the coat. Every so often, she glanced over her shoulder, as though expecting someone to come after them. When they reached a quieter part of the street, Daniel slowed. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Eskira," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold. "I'm Daniel," he said. "You're safe now." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. On this planet, safe was a fragile thing, easily broken. He had just stepped into a situation that could turn dangerous fast. He led her toward the supply station where he worked, keeping to side streets. His mind was already racing. How long could he hide her? Could he get her food? A blanket? Would anyone report him? Cyril walked beside him quietly, holding his coat tightly around her thin frame. Each breath she took seemed heavy, and her steps were slow. But she kept moving. As they reached the supply station door, Daniel glanced around one. Last time, the street was empty. Or so he thought. In the distance, a shadow moved, a tall figure watching from the corner. Daniel didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The pounding on the door came like a sudden explosion in the quiet. Daniel froze mid-step, his hand still holding the latch of the supply station's inner storage room. Syrah, seated on an empty crate and wrapped tightly in his coat, jumped at the noise. Her large dark eyes flicked toward the door, panic already spreading across her face. Another knock, harder, this time. Then a voice, sharp and commanding. Open this door. Now, Daniel's pulse quickened. That voice didn't belong to a merchant or passerby. It was the clipped tone of an alien guard. The kind of tone that didn't ask twice. He looked at Syrah. She shook her head quickly, her silver hair falling into her face. Please no, she whispered. They can't see you here, Daniel murmured back. Stay quiet. The knock came again, followed by the scrape of something metal against the doorframe. We know she is inside, human, the voice called. Out, you will hand her over. Daniel felt his jaw clench. The words were spoken in the alien trade tongue, but he understood enough to know there was no point pretending ignorance. They knew. Someone must have seen him lead her here. He stepped toward the door, but didn't open it. She's freezing. She needs help, he called back. You should be taking her to a clinic. A short laugh came from the other side, cold and cruel. Outcasts do not get clinics. You know the law. The law, Daniel had heard of it before, but never paid much attention until now. On this planet, there were those labeled outcast, stripped of any rights, branded by society as untouchable. Helping them was not just frowned upon, it was punishable. People had been jailed, fined, even beaten for less than what Daniel had done tonight. Inside the small storage room, Syrah pressed herself against the wall, her hands gripping the coat so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She didn't blink, her eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to break down. Daniel moved to the side, thinking fast. The supply station had a back way out, a narrow maintenance tunnel used to move crates when the main street was blocked. It wasn't meant for people, but it would do. Come on, he whispered, moving toward her. Her gaze flicked to the door, then to him. They'll catch us. Not if we move now. The banging grew louder, and this time, the metal latch rattled violently. Last warning, human. The guard barked. Daniel crossed the room in 3 steps, taking Syrah gently by the arm. We don't have a choice. He led her to the far wall, where a stack of old crates hid a small door with a faded warning sign. He pushed the crates aside with his shoulder and knelt to pull the latch. The hinges groaned, but the door swung open to reveal darkness beyond. Syrah hesitated at the threshold. Where does it go? A tunnel, Daniel said. It'll take us past the main street. The pounding at the front door stopped. A new sound took its place, the low, mechanical hiss of a lock override. They were bypassing the door's security. Daniel didn't wait. Go now. Sfera ducked into the tunnel, and Daniel followed, pulling the door shut behind them. The air inside was damp and smelled faintly of oil. The passage was narrow, forcing them to move in a crouch. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping water that splashed against the cold floor. They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled on the metal walkway. Behind them, the faint echo of the front door crashing open carried down the tunnel. Voices followed, shouting orders. The guards were inside. Sierra's breathing was quick, each inhale shaky. "They'll catch us," she murmured again. "Not if we keep moving," Daniel replied. Though his own heartbeat was loud in his ears, they reached a bend in the tunnel where a dim light flickered from above. Daniel stopped for a moment, catching his breath. "Are you all right?" She nodded faintly, but didn't meet his eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't do this. I've done worse," he said, forcing a small smile. Something in her face shifted, a flicker of surprise, maybe even trust. But it was gone in a moment as she looked down at the floor. Daniel stood and led the way again. The tunnel twisted left, then right, before ending at a metal grate. Beyond it, he could see the faint glow of street lamps. Freedom was just a few steps away. He crouched, gripping the grate's edge. "Help me with this." Together, they pulled, the metal groaning under their combined effort. The grate came loose with a sharp crack, and Daniel set it aside. They climbed out into a narrow side street. The cold hit them immediately, the snow crunching under their boots. Daniel quickly scanned the area. "No guards yet. We'll head toward the market," he said. "It's crowded enough, we can lose them." Sierra nodded, clutching the coat tighter. They started walking quickly, the wind biting at their faces. For a few moments, Daniel allowed himself to think they might actually make it. But then a voice rang out from the shadows ahead. Human. It said, low and dangerous. "You carry what is not yours." Daniel's eyes snapped to the source. A tall, alien figure stepped from the alleyway, his armor reflecting the faint streetlight. A guard's badge gleamed on his chest. The street was silent except for the faint hiss of snow drifting from the rooftops. The tall alien guard stood in the middle of the path, blocking any way forward. His armor was black and ridged, the kind that absorbed light rather than reflected it, but the silver badge on his chest gleamed like a cold star. Sierra froze beside Daniel, her steps faltering. He felt her grip tighten on his coat, as if she could anchor herself to safety by holding him. Her breathing quickened, each inhale sharp and unsteady. The guard's voice was calm, but there was something in it that carried weight like a blade. Resting against a throat, "You have taken an outcast, human. Give her to me, and I might forget I saw you." Daniel didn't move. He could see the outline of the guard's weapon at his hip, a short energy baton, known for cracking bones and leaving deep burns. "She's freezing," Daniel said evenly. "She needs help, not whatever you have planned." The guard tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Help is wasted on her kind. You know our law, helping an outcast makes you one. You'll be stripped of your rights, thrown into the street just like her." His gaze shifted to Sierra. "And you won't survive the cold." Sierra's grip on Daniel's coat tightened even more. She didn't speak, didn't even look at the guard, as if acknowledging him would make her fate real. Daniel thought fast. He couldn't fight a guard not here, not with Sierra in this state. But he also wasn't about to hand her over to someone who saw her life as nothing. He glanced around, quickly, side alleys, doorways, anything. The narrow market street was empty, except for closed stalls and dark shopfronts. No crowd to hide in. No easy escape. "Last chance," the guard said, stepping forward. The snow crunched under his heavy boots. "Hand her over." Daniel took a slow step back, placing himself slightly in front of Sierra. "If I refuse?" The guard's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile that came from humor. It was the kind that promised pain. "Then you walk away alone, if you're lucky." There was a faint flicker in Sierra's eyes, then a tiny spark of something like defiance. But it was smothered almost instantly by fear. She whispered, barely audible, "Don't. Please. Don't fight him." Daniel heard her, but his mind was already turning over options. Talking wouldn't work much longer. The guard's stance told him he was ready to act. The guard reached for his baton. That was the moment Daniel decided. He turned slightly towards Sarah and said softly, "When I move, run. Don't stop." Before she could reply, Daniel bent, grabbed a handful of snow, and flung it upward into the guard's face. The sudden burst of white powder caught the guard off guard, making him step back instinctively. "Run," Daniel barked. Sarah bolted, her bare feet barely making a sound on the snow. Daniel moved fast, ducking into the nearest side alley and following her. Behind them, the guard's voice roared with anger. Echoing off the stone walls, they tore through the maze of back streets, weaving between dark corners and frozen gutters. Daniel's heart pounded, the cold air burning in his lungs. Every few steps, he glanced back, half expecting to see the guard right behind them. Sarah led them instinctively toward narrower paths, slipping between crates and under low-hanging awnings. For someone so frail-looking, she moved quickly when fear drove her. Finally, they ducked behind an old, half-collapsed shed. The smell of rust and damp wood filled the air. Daniel crouched, pulling Sarah down beside him. Both of them breathed. Hard clouds of white fog spilling into the freezing air. "We lost him," Sarah whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not for long. Guards don't give up." Sarah hugged the coat tighter. "He won't stop. They never stop." Her words carried a weight that made Daniel frown. "Why? Why are they after you like this? You said you're an outcast, but that doesn't explain." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Daniel said, keeping his voice low. "If I'm going to risk my life for you, I need to know what we're running from." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, Daniel thought she wouldn't answer. But then, softly, she said, "I was promised. To someone powerful, I refused. My family paid for it. They stripped me, named me outcast, and left me to die." Daniel's stomach turned. "Promised? You mean yes?" She cut in, her voice trembling. "A forced binding. I ran. That's why they want me. Not because of what I've done, but because I said no." The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the streets. Not one pair, several. The guard wasn't alone anymore. Daniel's mind snapped back to the present. "We need to move. Now." He led her through another narrow alley, keeping to the shadows. The snow was falling harder now, swirling in the air, making it harder to see more than a few steps ahead. That was good, would cover their tracks. But as they turned a corner, a new problem appeared. At the far end of the alley, 3 more guards stood in formation, their armor dark against the white snow. The one in the middle raised his voice. "There's nowhere left to run." Sarah's hand found Daniel's sleeve. He could feel her trembling again. But this time it wasn't just from the cold. Asterisk snow whirled through the narrow alley like tiny knives cutting at their faces. Daniel's eyes darted left, right, up anywhere for an opening. But there was none. 3 guards blocked the alley ahead. Behind, heavy boots pounded closer. The trap was closing. Sarah's breathing came in quick, shallow bursts. Her grip on Daniel's arm was tight enough to hurt. "They've got us," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. His mind raced. He had been in bad situations before, but never with someone else's life tied to his choices. "No," he said finally. "Not yet." He scanned the walls around them. The buildings were old, patched together with metal sheets and wooden panels. One wall had a narrow drainage pipe running up toward a balcony. The pipe looked flimsy, but it was the only vertical path out. "Can you climb?" Daniel asked quickly. Sarah blinked at him, confused. Climb? In this cold? Without the boots? Behind them were louder now, the voices of the guards carrying through the alley. Daniel didn't wait for her to finish. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the pipe. "Up, now." She hesitated only a moment before putting her bare feet on the pipe. It groaned under their weight, the metal icy under her fingers. Daniel climbed right behind her, pushing when she faltered. Snowflakes clung to their hair, melting and running cold down their necks. A shout erupted below. They're climbing. One of the front guards reached for something on his belt, grappling. Line. But Daniel moved faster. He swung a boot into the nearest loose panel on the wall. It broke away with a crash, showering splinters and metal shards down onto the guards below. The brief distraction gave Sierra enough time to pull herself over the core shelf. A balcony edge. Daniel scrambled up after her, breathing hard. Move, he urged. They ran across the narrow balcony, ducking under laundry lines and low awnings. The wood creaked under their weight, but they didn't stop. Ahead, another walkway connected to the rooftops. Daniel led her across it. The city spreading below in a maze of streets, market stalls, and flickering lights. From up here, the noise of the chase was different distant shouts, echoing footsteps. But they were still being followed. The guards were climbing too. Sierra stumbled once, her foot slipping on a patch of ice. Daniel caught her arm before she fell. Careful, he muttered. But his tone wasn't sharp, was steady, calm, like he was trying to keep her from panicking. They reached a rooftop where the snow was thinner, blown away by the wind. Daniel scanned the cityscape. The marketplace was still a few blocks away, its faint glow visible even through the snowstorm. If they could reach it, the crowd might give them cover. This way, he said. They jumped from roof to roof, some gaps small enough to step over, others wide enough to make Sierra hesitate. Each leap made her heart race, but Daniel was always there, steadying her after she landed. Below them, shadows moved, guards tracking their movement from the streets. One of them pointed upward, and another raised a communicator to his mouth. They're calling in more, Daniel said grimly. Sierra's voice was barely audible over the wind. You should leave me. If they catch you not happening, Daniel said firmly, without even looking back. They reached the edge of the last rooftop before the market. The drop was steep, but a stack of covered crates below offered a possible landing. Daniel went first, dropping down hard but steady. He looked up, holding his arms out. Sarah hesitated only a second before she leaped. Daniel caught her, steadying her before she slipped on the snow-covered ground. Now they were back in the narrow streets, weaving between stalls and carts. The market was alive even in the cold, with traders shouting over each other, customers haggling. The smell of cooked food cutting through the freezing air. Here, among the press of bodies, the guard's dark armor was easier to spot. Daniel pulled Sarah toward a fabric stall. Stay low, he murmured, ducking between swaying rolls of cloth. The stall owner shouted at them in confusion, but Daniel ignored it. Through the gaps in the fabric, he saw two guards scanning the crowd, their heads turning slowly. One of them spoke into his communicator, and Daniel's gut tightened. They were too close. He guided Sierra into a side passage between two shops. But halfway through, figures stepped out from the shadows. It was the tall guard from before, the one they had snowblinded. Well, the guard said, his voice slow, almost amused. You run fast. For a human. Sierra froze again, her body tense as a bowstring. Daniel's mind flashed through options, none of them good. The passage was too narrow to fight in, and going back meant running straight into the other guards. The tall guard's hand drifted toward his baton. It's over. Give her to me. Daniel's voice came out steady, even though his heart pounded. If you want her, you'll have to get through me. The guard's eyes glinted. That can be arranged. Asterisk, the crash from the market was loud enough to rattle the walls around them. It was followed by a wave of shouting panic in dozens of voices. Smoke rolled above the stalls in thick gray swirls, and the smell of something burning mixed with the cold night air. The tall guard's head snapped toward the sound. For a brief moment, Daniel saw calculation in his eyes, like a predator weighing whether to chase one prey or another. That hesitation was the only reason Daniel and Sierra weren't already on the ground. "What is that?" Daniel asked, trying to sound casual, even though his pulse hammered. "Not your concern," the guard replied, though his hand had moved away from his baton. His eyes flicked back to Sierra, studying her with a sharpness that made Daniel uneasy. "But you? You are my concern." Before Daniel could respond, another figure appeared in the Aliyah, tall alien in dark gray armor, marked with a different insignia than the city guards. This one carried himself with authority, his steps deliberate. His helmet was tucked under one arm, revealing a face lined with scars and eyes that didn't miss a detail. "Varric," the first guard said stiffly, straightening his posture. "I had them cornered." Varric's gaze moved between Daniel and Sierra. When his eyes locked on her, something unreadable passed across his face. He took a slow step forward, ignoring Daniel completely. "You've caused quite a stir, Sierra," he said in a low voice. Sierra flinched, her grip on Daniel's coat tightening. "I don't know you." "You don't have to," Varric replied. "I know you. And I know what will happen if you're returned to the council." Daniel moved slightly in front of her. "And what's that?" Varric's eyes shifted to him. "Nothing good for her, or for you. Helping an outcast is enough to ruin a man here. Helping this outcast? Well, that's worse." The first guard looked confused. "Sir," the law silence, Varric ordered without looking at him. Then, to Daniel, "I can make this disappear. No charges, no punishment. You walk away tonight, free." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "And the price?" "You leave her with me." Sierra's breath hitched audibly. She stepped back, almost pressing into the wall. "No, please." Varric studied her for a long moment. "I'm not your enemy, Sierra, but you've put yourself in the path of people who will do far worse than I ever would. Give me the key, and I can end this chase." Daniel frowned. Key. Sierra's lips pressed tightly together. She didn't answer. Varric's tone softened, though his eyes stayed sharp. "You can't run forever, girl. This city isn't kind to your kind. And the man you're with? He doesn't know what he's stepping into." Daniel's voice was steady. "Maybe not. But I know what I'm stepping away from if I hand her over. Not happening." Varric's gaze lingered on him, as if measuring the weight of those words. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. "You have until sunrise. After that, every gate, every street, every roof will be watched. If you're still here, neither of you will leave breathing." Daniel took Sierra's arm gently. "We're leaving." Now, Varric didn't stop them. But as they passed, his voice followed like a shadow. "The key will lead you to death before it leads you to freedom." They didn't speak until they were well away from the market, the noise and smoke fading. Behind them, Sierra's steps were slow, her face pale under the dim streetlights. Daniel glanced at her. "Want to tell me what that was about?" She kept her eyes on the ground. "He's not lying about the key. So you do have something." Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "It's not just a thing. It's proof. Proof of what they did to my people. Proof that could make them answer for it." Daniel stopped walking. "And you've been carrying that around?" "Not on me," she said quickly. "It's hidden, far from here. But they know I can find it." Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. "So that's why they'll never stop. It's not about you being an outcast. It's about keeping you quiet." She nodded once. He let out a slow breath. "Then we're getting out of this city tonight." Her head snapped up. "You'd really take me that far?" Daniel met her gaze. I didn't put my coat on you just to watch you die later." Something flickered in her eyes, then not quite trust, but the first shadow of it. They continued down the empty road toward the city's outer district. The air felt heavier here, the buildings taller and more watchful. Daniel kept one hand near his sidearm, scanning every shadow. From the rooftops above, unseen eyes followed their every step. The figure blocking their path stepped forward, the moonlight catching the curve of a long blade strapped across his back. His coat was patched leather, worn but well kept, and his eyes glimmered like cold steel. "The bounty on her," he said, in a voice that carried no hesitation, "is mine." Daniel moved slightly in front of Sarah, his stance firm. "Not tonight." The man tilted his head, studying Daniel with mild interest. "You're human." His lips curled in something that might have been a smirk. "That explains the bad choices." From somewhere beyond the gate, the faint howl of wind cut through the night. The streets here were empty, silent, except for the three of them. Daniel knew this was no place for a standoff, too many blind corners, too many high vantage points, for others to join in. "You've got one chance to walk away," Daniel said evenly. The bounty hunter chuckled. "So do you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the hunter reached over his shoulder, pulling the long blade free. Its edge caught the faint blue light of the city's outer lamps. "You think you can keep her from everyone who wants her? You'll break before I do." Daniel didn't wait for him to make the first move. His hand went to the sidearm at his hip, drawing it smoothly. The hunter froze, not out of fear, but calculation. A blaster at close range could kill him before. He took 2 steps, but Daniel could tell he was confident enough to try, before either man could act. Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "He's not worth your life, Daniel. Let's just go." Daniel didn't take his eyes off the hunter. "Not if it means you end up in his hands." The hunter's eyes shifted to Sarah. "You think he's protecting you because he cares?" "Maybe. He does. But people care right up until the bounty is worth more than their conscience." Daniel took a step forward. "I don't sell people." The hunter gave a slow nod, as if filing that away for later. "Then I'll take you down too." The sound came before the movement boots hitting the ground behind them. Daniel spun, pulling Sarah with him, just as 2 more figures stepped from the shadows, both armed with short blades. The hunter had brought back up. "Run," Daniel told Sarah. She shook her head quickly. "Not without you." One of the backup men lunged, and Daniel fired a single shot. The bolt hissed past the man's shoulder, deliberately missing but close, enough to make him stagger back. "Last warning," Daniel said. The hunter didn't flinch. "Take them." The alley exploded into movement. One of the backup men rushed Daniel, forcing him to block with his forearm before slamming the man against the wall. The other went for Sarah, but she ducked, swinging Daniel's coat sleeve into his face. The thick fur lining gave her just enough cover to slip away from his grasp. Daniel fired again, this time hitting the ground in front of the second attacker. The sharp hiss and flash of light made the man retreat, cursing in his own language. The hunter moved then, faster than Daniel expected. In 2 long strides, he was almost within reach of Sarah. Daniel stepped between them, bringing his sidearm up only for the hunter to swipe the weapon aside with the flat of his blade. The shot fired harmlessly into the air. They struggled. The blaster pinned between them, the hunter's blade dangerously close to Daniel's ribs. Daniel twisted, using the momentum to shove the man back into a wall. The clang of steel against stone rang through the night. "Go." Daniel barked at Sarah again. This time, she ran straight toward the gate. Daniel broke free, sprinting after her. Behind them, the hunter cursed and gave chase, his backup close behind. The 3 of them spilled out beyond the gate into the wild stretch of dark forest that bordered the city. The cold here was different, sharper, cleaner, untouched by the heat and smoke of the market. The snow crunched loudly under their boots as they darted between the trees. Branches clawed at Daniel's coat, and his breath came in short bursts. Sira was fast, but exhaustion was catching up with her. He caught her arm, pulling her into the shadow of a thick pine, just as the hunter's footsteps drew close. They held still. The only sound, the soft hiss of snow falling through branches. The hunter's silhouette passed within a few paces, scanning the darkness. He muttered something low and frustrated before moving on. Daniel let out a slow breath. We can't stay here. They'll circle back. Sira nodded, shivering under the coat. Where do we go? He pointed deeper into the forest. There's a river about a mile in. If we cross, we can lose them in the rocks. They moved again, slower now, but steady. The forest closed in around them, the wind whispering through the high branches. Every so often, Daniel glanced back. Sometimes he thought he saw shadows moving between the trees. Sometimes he knew they were real. When they reached the river, water was black and fast, edged with jagged ice. Sira hesitated. We can't cross that. Daniel looked at her. We can. Just hold on to me. They stepped into the icy current. The cold bit instantly into Daniel's legs, but he kept moving, guiding her carefully. The water was only waist deep, but the force was strong enough to push at them. Twice Sira stumbled, and twice he caught her. By the time they reached the far bank, both were soaked and freezing, but the sound of pursuit had faded. They collapsed under a wide, low-hanging tree, catching their breath. Sira looked at him, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Daniel met her gaze, steady and sure. I know enough, and I'm not leaving you to them. Something in her expression softened, but before she could speak, a voice drifted through the trees, a voice they both recognized. Asterisk, the first light of dawn bled across the horizon, turning the snow a pale gold. Frost clung to every branch, every blade of grass, and the forest felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel and Sira stood together under the low-hanging tree, their clothes heavy with water from the river. Steam rose faintly from their breath in the cold air. From between the trees, Varric stepped into view. His armor caught the dim sunlight, each plate lined with frost. Behind him, no other guards followed. He had come alone. Enough running. Varric said, his voice even. This ends now. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Varric and Sira. If you're here to take her back, you'll have to go through me. Varric stopped a few paces away, studying him. If I wanted to drag her back to the council, I would have brought 50 men, but I didn't. His eyes shifted to Sira. Because I'm not your enemy. Sira's brow furrowed. You were ready to take me last night. Varric's gaze didn't waver. Last night, I needed to know if you were who I thought you were. Now I know. Daniel's hand stayed near his sidearm. Then talk fast. Varric glanced between them before speaking. There are things you don't understand. The key you're searching for, yes, it can expose the council, but it's more than proof. It's a seal. Whoever holds it can call every remaining clan of your people to war. The council will stop at nothing to destroy it. Sira's lips parted, shock flickering in her eyes. My father. He never told me that, because if you knew, they'd have killed you long ago, Varric said. Now they think they can corner you before you reach it. Daniel's jaw tightened. So what's your part in all this? I was ordered to bring you in, Varric admitted. But I've seen what the council has done, seen the families they've broken, the cities they've burned. I don't serve them anymore. He took a step closer. I want you to reach the key before they do, and I can help you. Daniel didn't move. And why should we believe you? Varric's eyes met his. Because you've seen how many are hunting? Her, alone, you won't make it far. Together, maybe you will. Silence hung between them for a long moment, broken only by the soft whisper of the wind through the frost-covered branches. Sierra's voice was quiet but firm. If you're lying, you'll know. Varric interrupted, and I won't live long enough to regret it. Daniel exhaled slowly. He hated trusting someone who had hunted them hours ago, but he also knew the truth. Varric was right. Alone, they were barely surviving. All right, Daniel said finally. But understand this, Sif. You turn on us, theirs. Nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from me. Varric gave the faintest ghost of a smile. Noted. They moved quickly after that, following Varric through winding forest trails that avoided open ground. The snow crunched softly under their boots, and the sun climbed higher, lighting the frost like shards of glass by midday. They reached the edge of a frozen ridge. Below, nestled in the shadow of a cliff, was a crumbling structure, stone walls half buried under snow. Even from here, Daniel could see the faint glimmer of metal at its heart. That's it, Sierra whispered. It's where my father hid. But they weren't alone. At the far side of the ruin, dark shapes moved 5 bounty hunters. Their armor painted in dull gray to blend with the stone. They were spreading out, searching. Daniel's hand went to his weapon. Guess we're not walking in. Varric's eyes scanned the ridge. We split them. I'll draw them toward the west wall. You to go in from the south. The key should be in the central chamber. Daniel didn't like the idea of splitting up, but there was no time to argue. Fine, don't get yourself killed. Varric smirked faintly. I'll try. He moved off silently, melting into the snow. Moments later, a sharp whistle echoed from the west side. 2 of the hunters turned toward the sound and moved to intercept. Daniel took Sierra's hand. Come on. They slipped down the slope, using the rocks for cover. The snow made each step careful, deliberate. A third hunter passed within 10 feet of them, but his attention was fixed on the west wall. They reached a narrow, inked break in the stone, just wide enough to squeeze through. Inside, the air was still and cold. The central chamber lay ahead, its floor covered in frost. And there, on a raised pedestal, sat a small metallic object, a disc engraved with intricate patterns, its edges faintly glowing. Sierra approached slowly, her breath quick. It's real, she whispered, reaching out. The moment her fingers brushed it, a soft hum filled the room. Light flared across the engravings, and Daniel felt the hair on his arms rise. Outside, shouts erupted. The hunters had realized the trick. Footsteps pounded toward the chamber. Daniel turned to Sarah. We have to move. She clutched the disc to her chest. Not without you. Varric appeared in the doorway then, a cut on his cheek but a steady fire in his eyes. Time to go. The 3 of them ran together, bursting out of the ruin into the blinding daylight. Behind them, the hunters gave chase, but they were too far. The forest swallowed the fugitives whole. Hours later, as the sun began to sink, they reached the safety of an abandoned outpost deep in the hills. For the first time since this began, Sierra let herself breathe. She turned to Daniel, her voice soft but certain. You gave me more than your coat that night. You gave me a chance to live. Daniel met her gaze. And I'm not done yet. Varric stood by the door, watching the forest. Neither am I. The snow kept falling, but inside the outpost, the air felt warmer, because now they weren't running alone.